Hey everyone, it's Bigfoot. Today's video is about how to deal, how to treat, and how to prevent blisters on the trail. Now today's video is brought to you by Life is Good 70, and he asked, how'd you deal with blisters? Maybe you didn't get any on the trail. I hiked 14 miles the other day in my old shoes and got 2 on my right foot. Well, first off, I can assure you that I did receive some blisters when I was on the trail. The hot spot for me was on my outer heels. Both my right and my left foot experienced this area right here, and it wasn't fun. So what I really want to talk about is things that you can do when you actually have the blisters, when you get blisters. How do you treat them? And then most importantly, how do you prevent them? There's lots of prevention measures that you can do, things that I use on the trail and things that I've learned through my research and through other hikers. But starting off, let's talk about how blisters form. So blisters that you're going to be experiencing on the trail are formed because of friction to your feet. And there's lots of reasons why this happens. Now, I'll get into those reasons in just a moment, but let's talk about what do you do when you get blisters. So the first thing a lot of people ask, do you pop blisters or do you not pop blisters? And I did a lot of research on this and before I hiked the trail, and also before I did this video, just to get some of the expert advice. And I'll tell you that the consensus is it is better to pop the blister and relieve the stress that you have on that blister, especially if you're experiencing pain. But it's better to pop the blister instead of waiting for it to pop in an uncontrolled environment. If you pop it yourself, you can control the environment, and that's a lot better situation to be in. All right, well, what happens when you get a blister and you need to pop it? So first thing you need to do is you want to make sure that the entire area is clean. After you clean the area that you're going to be popping your blister, then you want to get a needle and you want to sterilize it. So for me, I kept a needle with me. I kept it just in a little piece of foam, and I would throw it in my first aid kit. Now, there are two ways that you can sterilize your needle. You can either sterilize it with a lighter, or you can put it in boiling water for 2 minutes. So I typically would sterilize it with a lighter. Now, after you sterilize your needle, the next step is puncturing the blister. Now, you want to have a big enough puncture that it's going to be able to drain the blister, but you don't need to cut an entire hole, okay? So what I did is I would puncture the bottom of the blister so that it would drain with gravity. So typically somewhere on the bottom end of the blister is a great place. Now, once you do puncture it, you want to make sure that the blister is completely drained. Sometimes you might have to kind of press on the very top lightly on the blister so that you can get the rest of the fluid inside the blister drained. All right, now once you're done draining your blister, the next thing you want to do is put some sort of antibiotic ointment on it. I use Neosporin on mine, and then after you apply, you're going to put some sort of gauze bandage on it. I typically would carry a couple of Band-Aids that had the gauze on them, and then I would use that to cover my blister. Now, after I would cover my blister with a Band-Aid, I would typically, or some sort of gauze, then I would cover everything with Katy tape. Now, I'll get back to Katy tape in just a little bit. So that's kind of the process of what you would do when you get a blister and you need to pop it. And again, when I did a lot of research on this, experts say that you should pop them because at some point in time they're probably going to pop anyway, so it's better to do it in a controlled environment than in an environment where it's in your dirty, sweaty, nasty sock. So what happens when your blister pops while you're actually hiking in your dirty, nasty sock? Well, the first thing that you need to do is you need to clean and disinfect the area. Now, the best thing to do is clean it with whatever you have. If you have an alcohol swab, great. A lot of folks on the trail usually don't have alcohol swabs, but you can use Perel. Any sort of hand sanitizer, just get a dab of it and put it on, after you clean it, put it on your the area that's infected, your blister. The next thing that you want to do after you disinfect is, if the flap of skin that is attached to your blister, if it is dirty, you want to make sure you remove that because it's probably infected and you don't want that sitting on top of your blister. So cut that piece of that flap of skin off. And lastly, you're going to treat that area with the antibiotic ointment, again, Neosporin or something similar to that, and then, of course, bandage it up and use the same process as I talked about before. All right, well, one of the things that I've heard a lot on the trail, and I've always wondered is, can you actually use super glue for blisters? So I looked this up, and according to Section Hiker, if you haven't checked out Section Hiker blog, he's got a great blog, he talks about blister prevention. And one of the things he actually states in there is about using super glue. Now, after you clean and sterilize the area, if you have that flap of skin that you don't have to cut off because it is sterilized, it's clean, you can actually super glue that flap of skin back to the blister area. So you can use this, but the only thing is it does hurt like hell. So he does state that, but anyway, I thought that was very interesting. All right, well, let's talk about how you prevent blisters from ever happening. There's lots of things that you can do out there, just like anything else, and I think blister prevention is really important. So the first thing all comes down to what kind of footwear that you're buying. Now, there's two different types of footwear that hikers are going to use. They're either going to use boots or they're going to use trail runners. Most light and ultralight hikers these days go with trail runners. That's what I went with. But there's still a lot of folks out there that are using boots. Now, I did a whole video on this. Check that out if you're kind of torn on which one is better for you. But the first thing that you want to do is when you choose your footwear, typically you want to go an entire size above whatever your shoe size is. For me, I actually had to go a whole size and a half. So I wear a size 10.5 foot, and I actually had to wear a size 12. And what's going to happen is, as you're hiking all of these miles, your feet are going to expand. And when your feet expand, you need to have the space in your shoe or boot to be able to accommodate this from happening. If you don't do that, your feet, they have nowhere to go. And what's going to happen is what happened actually to me on a rim-to-rim-to-rim hike in the Grand Canyon a few years ago, where my toe, actually it was my right toe, was expanded and actually touched the very front of my shoe. And after hiking 40-something miles, I ended up losing my toenail on my right foot. It was really nasty, and it stunk and it hurt. So you want to make sure that you have typically a full size, depending on your shoes. I needed a full size and a half. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you break your footwear in. For trail runners, it's not as big of a deal with a lot of the ultralight and light trail runners these days. I still tried to break mine in a little bit, but it's going to be tough because you're out on the trail and you're going to be buying shoes. If you go with trail runners, you're probably going to go through 3 or 4 pairs of shoes. However, really important that you're breaking them in if you are wearing boots. A lot of people make this mistake and they don't break their boots in, and it just causes a ton of blisters because the boot is trying to conform to your feet. And while it's doing that, it's just really uncomfortable for your foot, and with all the friction that you're getting on your feet, just causes a lot of blisters. So footwear is the basis and the starting point. Really, really important. Now, the next thing that you want to do is you want to try to keep your feet as dry as possible. Now, there are a few ways that you can do that. Now, the first way is making sure that you bring extra pairs of socks. For me, I brought 2 pairs of socks. I kept one as my camp pair, and I kept one as my hiking pair. As you saw in my last video, I talked about that if I changed anything and what I would do on my next through hike, I would actually have brought 3 pairs of socks. I would have brought 2 for hiking and then 1 for camp. What I would have done with those 2 pairs I would use for hiking is I just would have changed those out. If I had one that got really wet and the conditions started to dry off, you'll find that your trail runners will dry really quickly. Boots, not so much. And if you're wearing trail runners, most of the time I remember my trail runners actually drying out way before my socks. So there are times where I actually ended up just putting my camp socks on just because my feet were just so wet and I couldn't get them dry with the socks. That's one thing you do, is make sure that you have enough pairs of socks where you can change them out to try to keep your feet as dry as possible. The next thing that a lot of folks do is wear sock liners. And so what they'll do is they'll wear sock liners on their feet, and then over their socks they will put their hiking socks. And what this will do is the sock liners will be able to wick the moisture from your feet, and that will help with, again, just preventing the blisters from happening. All right, well, the last thing that you can do with keeping your feet dry is having camp shoes. There are a lot of folks out there that are kind of split on whether to have camp shoes or not. I would say about 75% of the hikers out there actually have camp shoes. Now, for me, I actually had sandals, and I just used them in camp and I used them in town. But I think it's important to have some sort of camp shoe with you because it gives your feet the ability to dry out. I can't tell you how important it is for your feet to dry out. Now, You can walk around barefoot in camp and things like that, but I never like to do that. But that is an option to be able to dry out your feet and not have the extra weight of camp shoes. Now, you can also have some multi-purpose with some of your camp shoes. These shoes themselves, I actually originally bought for the trail. I ended up not bringing them. And these are called the Vivo Barefoot Ultra 2s. And these are water shoes. And the nice thing about these is they do strap down, so they're not like sandals. And you can actually forge rivers and things like that in these. Now, there wasn't a lot of water on the trail last year. And I think when I got to Maine, I only had to ford about 2 rivers, I believe. So it really wasn't that bad. It wasn't worth it. But if it's a wetter year and that's something that you're concerned about and you want to have some footwear and not get your boots or trail runners wet, that is an option. But I did see quite a few hikers have these. The most common camp shoe, I would say, was Crocs. So I probably saw these on about maybe, I don't know, a third of the hikers that had camp shoes. So anyway, but between Crocs, between the Vivo Barefoots and then the sandals, that pretty much was about the combination of all the camp shoes that I saw on the trail. The next thing you want to do is maintain and clip your toenails. So if you don't do this, what's going to happen is in your shoe, there's going to be a lot of force moving your foot. And this kind of depends, especially when you're earlier on your hike and your foot hasn't expanded as much, and you obviously have your shoe that's a full size bigger. And if you don't have your shoes really tight, your foot, your heel is going to move. And what's going to happen is if you have that pressure on your toenails that continue to hit parts of your inside of your shoe, that pressure is going to really put a lot of pressure on the under part of your toenails, and that's where you get the I think they call it black nail, which is what I got when I was on that Grand Canyon. That I ended up basically getting a blood blister underneath my toenail, and my toenail ended up falling off. Another reason is if it doesn't create the blood blisters or that black nail that I talked about, it can also create blistering around your toes. So it's really, really important that you are keeping your toenails maintained throughout your hike. All right, my next prevention step is wearing insoles. This is going to help not just with comfortability in your shoes, but this also helps prevent plantar fasciitis. I saw a lot of hikers using these on the trail just for that in itself. And then at the same time, before your feet start to expand in the beginning, this will also help having the right insoles. So it really depends on your insoles and your feet and getting the right ones. But this will help prevent the shifting of your feet in your actual shoe. So if you get the right ones, this will also prevent that, which means you're preventing friction. All right, let's talk about hot spots. There are going to be areas of your feet that are going to be vulnerable to a lot of friction. For me, like I said earlier, it's on the outer sides of my heels. And whether you know this or you start to see the hot spots start to form, there are ways that you can help reduce this friction. Now, the old school way is using duct tape or moleskin, and this is just not effective methods with the technology that we have out there and some of the tools that we have now. I strongly discourage you using duct tape or moleskin. And the reason why you don't want to use duct tape or moleskin is they just lose their adhesiveness to the skin when there's moisture. You're going to get a ton of moisture in your feet, so they're just ineffective. So the thing that I recommend, and this is what all pros recommend, is athletic tape. I use Katie tape, and the reason, for a couple of reasons actually, the reason why I pick Katie tape. First and foremost, you can find it really anywhere. You can find it in any drugstore, any Walmart, any Target, anywhere on the trail really has Katie tape. And I will tell you that the athletic tape is great because, number one, it's going to adhere. If it is properly applied, it's going to adhere to the skin and it's not going to come off. It doesn't matter if it's wet, if it's downpouring rain, how much you sweat, it's going to stay stuck to your body. The other thing you use for athletic tape is this is used for rehabilitative taping. So it's designed to facilitate the body's natural healing process while providing support and stability to joints and muscles without having any range of motion restriction. So having the ability to be able to use your athletic tape for both that and for the areas of hot spots to reduce the friction, Katie tape is so much more effective than moleskin and duct tape. All right, and my last tip is actually how you lace your shoes. So I've done some research on this and I found a really effective technique that when done correctly, it's going to help keep your heel and your foot from moving and sliding around in your shoe. This will be extremely effective in the beginning when your feet haven't expanded yet, and there is a little bit of play with you having a shoe size that is a little bit bigger than your foot. So let's go ahead and do a demonstration of that now. All right, so this is called the lace lock technique. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with putting each lace in the very top hole. And then you're going to keep a loop on each side. Now, the next thing you're going to do, you have your 2 loops, and you're going to tighten your shoe. After you tighten your shoe, you will then bring each lace through the opposite loop. And then what you're going to do is you're going to tighten it, and then do your normal lacing and bow. Just like that. All right, and what this is going to do is it's going to help keep your foot, your heel from moving, which is going to prevent your foot from moving forward with your heel staying in place. And again, it's going to reduce that friction. So just show this one more time. Take my laces and I'm going to roll them through my very top shoelace that's always open until I have my 2 loops. Tighten my loops, or excuse me, tighten my shoe, and then I will take each lace, put it through the corresponding loop, and then tighten both loops, and then tie the rest of my shoe. And that is the lace lock. All right, everyone, well, that wraps up my video of blister prevention and how to deal with them on the trail. I hope you learned something, and if you have any effective ways that you've dealt with blisters on the trail or anything I didn't mention, please comment them below so all of us can learn. Thanks, everyone. Stay tuned for my next sighting, and remember to always follow Bigfoot.